everybody, to another episode of What the Fuck? Paranormal Chat with the Naked Bigfoot. I am your humble host, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. Sorry if I take a few deep breaths. I had to do a late evening breathing treatment, and it makes you breathe a little heavy, so it will be nothing. It's nothing sexual and or life threatening right now. So don't anybody freak out if you see me pause and take a deep breath. Before we begin tonight's episode, as always, there's a few disclaimers that I must put forth. The views, opinions of your host and that are expressed on this show are exclusively those of the Naked Bigfoot, which is me. This show is meant to inform, to be informative, and to be entertaining. If you happen to leave from watching this show and become curious about the world around you and the preternatural, supernatural, and paranormal wonders just all around us, I feel that I have done my job. As always, this show is not for anybody under the age of 17 or under, especially the little ones, because, fair warning, your humble host is not only some of the topics that he discusses are sometimes a little hardcore, sometimes a little bloody, sometimes a little frightening. But, hey, Papa Joey, you're here. Yay, good to see you, man. Good to see you, Chris. Everybody's in the chat tonight. I love seeing everybody. Your humble host will be using bad words tonight. It is just part of his repertoire when he is telling a tale and relating a story. To act as both metaphors and adverbs to what he's discussing. So if you have little ones in the room with you now that you don't wish exposed to bad words, please have them leave the room now or put on a pair of headphones so the little ones cannot hear it. Because I will guarantee you I will be dropping the F-bomb many times. And as you well know, the title of my show is W.T.F. What the fuck? So it will be, it's in the title, folks. I OD'd on albuterol. Dude, albuterol can fuck you up like Percocet. You're getting me off subject. Oh, God. As always, we also play a drinking game on the show. For those who are not aware or new to the show, every time you hear me say that is a story for another time or that is a story for another day, please take a sip of your adult beverage of choice. If you do not imbibe adult beverages, please take a sip of your water, juice, tea, whatever it is you wish to drink. If you are playing the game and you are imbibing adult beverages, the Naked Bigfoot insists that you do not drink and drive. Imbibe responsibly. Stay at home when you drink. Alrighty. Oh, real quick, I just want to make a note. I hope everybody who watches this tonight or in the future who watched the previous episode, Haunted Objects, I hope everybody had a good night. I did hear from a few viewers who watched it that they did have some unusual experiences in their dream state as they dreamt, as they tried to sleep, that they felt a certain way after showing the piece of the stone of the actual grave marker of Marie Laveau, the former voodoo queen of New Orleans. So I heard from a number of people with a lot of private messages. I'm not gonna out anybody, but I didn't hear anything that I felt would I felt, and like I said last night, it's not something that'll be long lasting. Maybe a day or two, maybe three. You won't be harmed, but it will fuck up your night for a while when you're exposed to that kind of energy. So even if you're secondhand exposure through a broadcast like this, it does happen. Alrighty, on with tonight's show, The Devil's Tramping Ground. For those who are not aware of this, and you have seen heard me talk about this in previous shows, how fucked up and the South is when it comes to paranormal, supernatural, and preternatural um, experiences and things, both with cryptids, ghosts, paranormal critters, um, you name it. The South is haunted. I'm just going to call it that, the haunted South. It starts in the Appalachian Mountains and it spreads out across the South. I truly believe the South is probably, that stretch of land is probably the most haunted stretch of landmass in the entire world is the South. We're talking about from Virginia down, West Virginia, Virginia, all the way down and across, extending past Arkansas into Texas and Arizona. All kinds of strange and bizarre things that happen. And there are a lot of locations that are considered by a lot of people to be mystery locations. What's a mystery location? If anybody's ever done a road trip throughout the United States, which everybody knows I have, it was a very long many year road trip that I took to discover myself and to also discover the strange and unusual and sometimes frightening things that exist in our backyards. And there's a lot of places that are called mystery spots in the United States where sometimes the laws of physics don't apply. Um, Sometimes they're reputed to be portals there. All sorts of things. Some of the spots, gravity works in a different way. Um, like there's a lot of states that you go to. Pretty much every state in the entire country has what's called a gravity hill, where you'll put your car in neutral and you're at the bottom of a hill, and your car will literally be pulled up by natural, supernatural, preternatural forces. It'll actually be pulled up the side of the hill. Um, and every state and every gravity hill that exists in the United States has a legend that explains why that happens. Why am I saying all this? Because I just want to say there's a lot of mysterious spots and a lot of odd locations that at first seem frightening and sometimes continue to be frightening, um, interesting, fun, you name it. Um, and see, Chris here in Bald and Bonkers, he just said there's a place like that in Scotland. So there are places like that all around the world. Gravity hills exist all around the world. I'll probably do a show on a gravity hill because when I was up in New Jersey in the Pine Barrens, I'll let you guess really quick what I was trying to find out and investigate up in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey for all my cryptid lovers out there. There's a gravity hill up there too, and I had an opportunity to fuck around with it. So I'll probably do a show about that in addition to the show about what I did out in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Um, Again, I double dog dare you um, to say what I was looking for in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. I will tell you this, what I did find scared the shit out of me. So, but that is a story for another day. Let's go back to mystery spots. There is a mystery spot in North Carolina. It is actually in a little community called, well, it's not a little community anymore. It's blown up actually, um, called Bear Creek, North Carolina. And Bear Creek, North Carolina, is nestled between the Appalachian Mountains and Raleigh, North Carolina. It's almost literally between the two. Not exactly up against the mountains, but not exactly up against the city. It's very rural. It's actually Bear Creek is well known for its it was well known for its farming communities. Um, it has since become well known for being a major tourist attraction, especially for campers, people in RVs and such that go on camping excursions and stuff. Being a site for a lot of campers. A beautiful land out there. Really not developed much whatsoever. Even this was years ago when I was down there. But in Bear Creek, there is it was a farm. It probably still is a farm unless it got incorporated into some of the state forests around there. There was a farm there, and on that farm, there is a 40-foot circle that is known to the locals. Well, it has many names. The Devil's Tramping Ground, the Devil's Worry Spot, creatively enough, the Dead Zone. But within this, and it's a bit of a hike to get to even today. Um, to get to the Devil's Tramping Grounds today, it's a hike to get to. But there's actually a lot of signs pointing to it because the locals there are quite proud of having this spot there, and having this there. But you cannot pay them enough money to go there and stay there the night within the circle. And we'll get to that in a few moments. um, Again, they're proud to have it there because it brings in a lot of tourism. But they're also, they know, you take a lot in your own hands when you go to this place. And um, you will find out in a few moments what I mean by that. But there is a 40-foot circle in the corner of a cow field. I call it a cow field. Any field where any field that is surrounded by a fence, up against the woods. And it's nestled, actually, Devil's Tramping Ground is actually up against a very large old forest, uh, which we'll talk more about that in a moment. But within this 40-foot circle, there is nothing will grow whatsoever. There are no microbes in the soil. Grass will not grow in this 40-foot circle. Um, Plants wither and die when they are planted within the circle. People have actually put potted plants in the circle, and sometimes they'll leave it there overnight, and the next morning it's dried up and dead, or the next morning the plant is completely gone, or the plant has been moved outside the circle up against the woods, leading to the paths that lead into the forest. We'll talk about that more in a moment, too. But I just wanted to point out that nothing goes there. The local wildlife will not set paw or hoof um, in this circle whatsoever. People who have their pet dogs with them, the dogs absolutely refuse to cross into the circle. They whine. They're completely terrified of the circle. People on horseback. The horses will go all the way around the circle. More than one rider walk within the circle. So with this circle, you may ask, well, at the time that I went there to the Devil's Tramping Ground, I was coming out of Asheville, um, North Carolina, heading to Raleigh. I was going to a reptile show that was being held in Raleigh. At the time, for those who don't know, when I was on the road during my great discovering myself phase, I was never completely alone. I had some pet snakes with me, And I had a few pet tarantulas with me at the time that traveled with me everywhere. They were my critters who went with me absolutely everywhere. And whenever I heard of a a show, an exotics show that sold other exotic animals, I could go there and I could get them treats and stuff, or purchase another snake or whatever I needed at the time. But that's a story for another day. Mike's traveling menagerie. Menagerie. I gotta say it correctly. Uh, oh, dude, I used to have a hell of a. Oh, Chris, I used to have a hell of a collection of tarantulas. And I used to collect some truly venomous things. Um, that when I finally did settle down, I had a wall of incredibly dangerous critters that would kill you very quickly. I was famous for my scorpion collections. My favorite being the Israeli Death Stalker, which is a boothid. And anybody who knows anything about scorpions know that boothids are incredibly venomous, and you're pretty much dead when you get stung by one of them. And I had quite a few of them in my collection, and they are some scary little tanks. Um, I always like surrounding myself with dangerous and surrounding myself with death. But that's a story for another day, which maybe one day I'll share with everyone. Alrighty, I was leaving out of there and I was heading over there, and I stayed the night um, in Bear Creek, and I saw some of the local literature at the motel that I was staying at talking about the Devil's Tramping Ground. So of course I went and started asking the locals the next morning about the Devil's Tramping Ground, and everybody told me the story about how the devil goes there to plot what evils to unleash upon the world and upon mankind. This is the spot he makes all of his plans in. And his very presence has polluted the land, allowed nothing to grow there and nothing to live there. And I thought, that's just right up my alley. Let me go see if this is true. And I asked, well, can you stay there? They said, well, why the fuck would you want to do that? I said, well, I introduced myself for real then and told them I was this wily adventurer. Um, hey, welcome to the show tonight. Um, and they said, well, at the time it was still private property. I remember this was years and years ago. It was still private property. So I had to go and ask the farmer who owned the property permission to stay on the property. And he gave me the rules of staying on the property. He says I can't leave any litter there. If I take a shit on the property, I should bury it. All the basic rules. Not to tear down any of the fences, not to disturb any of the animals, not to dig up the roads with my vehicle. Um, and he also asked me if I would pay him $50 for doing it. So I looked at him and I said, "Is it worth $50 to stay on your property at the Devil's Tramping Ground?" And he said, "Oh." He says it's very worth $50 to stay in the Devil's Tramping Ground. I went, okay, here's $50. I gave him $50. Um, real fast. I I spent money to do some of the dumbest shit um, in the world. I don't consider this dumb shit that I did at this time, but during my travels, I spent money on some really stupid stuff to go and experience it, and try to investigate or learn more about it. Besides the Devil's Tramping Ground, when I was in Kentucky and Tennessee, uh, I was fascinated by the snake handling cults of Christian cults, and these were actual cults. Snake handling is a cult, trust me, and I don't like using the C word, but this really is a cult. The snake handling is a cult that I will have to do a show on the snake handling cults. But I made donations to their church to be able to go in and experience their religion and experience their worship up close and personal. Let's just say if you're not a fan of snakes, you don't want to go around these people. And if you're not a fan, you can't be afraid of people going completely ape shit and bat shit in front of you. Because those their religious ceremonies are quite lively. But that's a story for another day, and I think I might just tell that story next week about that. Um, Let me pause. Thanks for everybody who's just tuning in. Welcome to my show. You'll learn really, really fast that I do stray from the subject, but I get back on course fairly quickly. Like, for instance, I'm getting back on course now. So, I went there and I realized that I had nothing to sleep in, and I couldn't drive my vehicle through the field to go to the circle. There was a clear little pig trail that led back there to it. At the end of a dirt road, led back there to it, past a cow gate, led back to it. And I realized when I went up there that I had nothing to sleep. I had no tent at all with me at the time. So I took time to turn my ass all the way back around, go back into town, find a sporting goods shop. I don't know if it's still there or not, but if anybody goes to Beaver Creek, there's a place called Parrots on right off Main Street that sells all kinds of sporting good and fishing equipment. You should go there. The people there were really nice. It was a family-run business. But I told them where I was going. I told them I wanted to. They said, "Well, if you want the full experience, then don't bring a tent." And I looked at them weird, like, "What the fuck do you mean by that?" They said, "Just bring a sleeping bag." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, sell me a good sleeping bag." That's when they sold me a good sleeping bag, and I went all the way back up there. Went down the pig trail. I will tell you this: as I was walking down the pig trail with the sleeping bag on my back, it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon when I went there. But as soon as I stepped off the dirt road and took that trail, I shit you not, I swear to high God, I swear to the eternal that the sun felt like it felt like the sun was going down around me. The shadows got a lot longer. Um, the forest got a lot darker. It went from birds tweeting, flies buzzing, to like you just walked into the typical haunted woods. It just felt, everything felt dark and more oppressive at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which was the hottest part of the day. If I hadn't said it already, it was in the middle of summer. The middle of summer in North Carolina is a bitch, just to let everybody know. But when I went down that trail, the air was no longer hot. It was very cold. It was getting very cool. There is no running water nearby, to where it would help cool. No waterfalls or anything to help cool the air around you. No breeze. What little bit of air that was coming through the woods smelled stale. Like you were in a very ancient part of the forest where old things had decayed and were continuing to decay around you. That was my first impression walking down that little pig trail into the woods and heading over to the Devil's Tramping Ground. I got finally at the end of the trail. There was an old barbed wire fence, an old rusty barbed wire fence. It was a 3-line barbed wire fence. For those who don't know what a 3-line barbed wire fence is exactly the way it sounds. It's 3 pieces of barbed wire connected running between wooden poles, which is done in a wide style, so your livestock can't get out, but a person can actually squat down or bend down and crawl between the wire to get across from it. So when I finished getting myself hung up on the barbed wire and finally got my ass through it, I saw in front of me this huge, of course, being 40, 60 feet, something like that, patch of dirt, which was actually in a complete circle that was at the edge of the field up against the forest that I had just walked through. The closer I got to it, the less animal noises that I heard, until by the time I got to the very edge of this void in nature, um, there were no bird sounds whatsoever. It was as if everything around me was holding its breath, wondering what I was going to do next. And for a moment, I asked myself, oh, why the fuck am I here? I started doubting myself, which I didn't do that. It was not a common it was not something common that if I was going into a potentially dangerous situation to investigate or learn more about something paranormal or supernatural or preternatural, that I would doubt myself. I went into it not with assurance, not with arrogance, uh, but I always presented myself boldly to whatever I was about to experience. Um, but I started doubting myself right when I got to the edge. I started questioning, do you really want to do this? Why are you doing this? And I said, this is why. And I started feeling a tinge of fear starting to well up inside of me. And it was an utterly, completely irrational fear. I was dreading a patch of dirt, for God's sake, stepping into it. The locals hadn't told me any stories at all about it, except for being the devil's tramping ground, and they thought it was funny that if I went up there to experience it myself for the first time. And it made no sense. It was completely and utterly irrational. I had to force myself to take the next step that I took, which took my left foot over into this circle, this dead circle, where nothing was living in it. There were no stones in it. It was a flat, it looked like it wasn't a crater. It didn't look burned. It just looked devoid of life of any sorts within it. But as soon as my left foot went over the edge and made contact with it, my fear vanished. It completely vanished. Something was telling me not to go in there. Well, something was giving me I believe, not telling me not to go in there, but was giving me a choice at the time. Do I enter the gates of hell? Do I step across a threshold to see what horrible wonders await me? Or do I turn around and walk back? It was that kind of choice. And that choice was being presented to me. I think in an emotional, terrifying way. It was making me experience fear, making me doubt myself, until I fought through it and went, I'm going to do this. And that's when I stepped over into the circle. And that's when the doubts vanished. That's when this feeling of dread and fear absolutely dried up inside of me. And I took a deep breath, and I kept walking into it until I got to the middle of the circle, or where I judged about the middle of the circle was, and sat down my little pack and sat down my brand new sleeping bag. I think I still own that sleeping bag too. I'll have to go one day, send my son through to go through all my shit in the third barn and see if he can find it with all the other things of that part of my life that are in storage there in that old tobacco barn, and see if he can find that sleeping bag, because it probably still has some of the dirt on it. I sat there and was looking around. The wind wasn't blowing. There was no sounds of wildlife. You couldn't even hear cicadas. For those of you who have ever been through the South in the summertime, the cicadas can be almost deafening when you're in the woods. completely. You can't hear yourself think. And the road leading up to the pig trail going back there, you could hear the cicadas. Even with the windows rolled up on the car, you could still hear the damn cicadas. They were so loud, buzzing away in the woods. But here at the Devil's Tramping Ground, um, absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing whatsoever. So I sat there. I wasn't going to leave. I had my little snackies with me. I had enough water with me to last for a few days since I didn't want to leave there. Um, I brought, of course, my toilet paper, my camping toilet paper, for taking craps in the woods. But I had to make sure I buried it because that was the rules of going there and staying there. And my first night there, I went to sleep fairly quickly as soon as the sun went down. Um, at the time, I was wearing, well, I wasn't wearing it. I had my grandfather's old pocket watch with me to keep track of the time during my travels. And I was keeping track of my time there, the timing it. And I had my journal out, of course, recording any experiences, what I saw there. And I, of course, made notes of the absolute lack of life within the circle around me. I put my hands into the soil of there around me. It was dry. It wasn't hard. The soil was not hard. It was dry. It felt like something like the earth had been through a kiln and then pulverized into dust and placed there. That's how fine the soil was around me. Um, Dug deep. There was no moisture with my hands. There was no moisture in the ground. There were no earthworms in the ground whatsoever around me. And again, I saw that there was a lack of stones there as well. The sun went down. And I didn't go to sleep right away. I wanted to stay awake to see if I saw anything. And eventually, it was hot. So I went to sleep. And it was about around 12:30, 12:45 after midnight. I heard an owl. And the owl hoot sounded like it was standing right beside my fucking head when it did it. And I just shot up in my sleeping bag, scared shitless when the owl let it rip beside me. And I looked around. I pulled out my flashlight, shined it all around me to see if I could see the hoot owl. There was no fucking owl around me. But behind me, I heard something rustling. I didn't stand up. I was still in my sleep, halfway in my sleeping bag. So I inched more my way around and turned around to see what that rustling was, with my flashlight pointed in front of me to see what I saw. And right at the edge of where my flashlight, where the light ended, which of course was at the edge of the circle, at the very edge of my sight, I saw 6 pairs of eyes. Eye shine. I knew right away it wasn't animals because of the way they were moving. They were bobbing like heads moving around. One set of eyes was no more than 2 feet off the ground. Another set of eyes was no more than 6 feet off the ground. Another one, I swear, was 10 feet off the ground. But they were all moving together, weaving together around the edge of the circle, never crossing into the circle or into the area of my flashlight. I felt cold. My skin, goosebumps broke out across my entire body, looking at the 6 sets of eyes that were looking at me, that were weaving in front of me, these figures that were weaving around in front of me. And again, these were things barely perceptible of having 2 legs and 2 arms, not having 4 legs and a tail. So these were vaguely humanoid things that were just outside the circle. Again, as a group, moving as a group, weaving around the circle. And I was following them with my flashlight, and I was fucking petrified. And then that's when I heard it. They made no sound. Whatever was outside, there was barely a rustle of feet on the ground, barely perceptible. But then I heard something cackle behind me. Couldn't tell if it was an old woman or an old man, but something laughed like it had just seen the funniest thing in the world. And that's when I stood straight the fuck up and whirled back around from the eyes to see what had made that cackle sound. And there was absolutely nothing there. So I whirled back around because I realized I did something stupid. I took my eyes off of the eyes behind me. There was six somethings outside of the circle, dancing on the edge of the circle outside of my light that were watching me. So when I turned back around, the six sets of eyes were gone. I have to say that I was not feeling very courageous at the time, so I did not. My better sense told me not to walk up and walk back to the edge of the circle and see what was outside the circle. So after sitting up, it felt like hours. I was sitting up, wide awake, flashing my light all around me, constantly looking to see if anything else would appear around me. I somehow fell back asleep and woke up right when the sun was coming up and it was beginning to hit my face and starting to warm my face up. And I got up and went back to the woods. Same experience. Got in the car, went into town, went to the local diner, um, which was like an IHOP, but more homier, a lot more fun, a lot nicer people, with good food. And the locals had already known. They were the ones, a lot of the locals there, the old timers, had already knew that I was going there and told me what to do, and, told me who to go talk to and to go up there and experience. They looked at me when I walked in. I must look like pure hell with my eyes bloodshot from not sleeping worth a damn and being terrified. And I sat down over there with them, and they said, "Well, how'd you sleep?" I said, "Like shit, of course." And I told them what I had seen, the eyes and the cackling. And they said, "But when you woke up the next morning, um, Papa Joey, I was never smart enough to run. I was never something. Something always kept me from running from a lot of experiences that I had. I'm not saying that I never ran from shit. I did, but in this case, I did not run." Um, and they said, "Well, that's common. Um, They said there are things there that do dance at night around the circle, but they never come in the circle." And I said, "Well, what the hell was in the woods cackling at me?" They said, "Well, that was the devil." And I looked at them like, "What the fuck are you saying?" That was the actual devil, um, that was laughing behind me. They said, "Yeah, he was probably there watching you and laughing at you the whole time with your reaction to his servants over there dancing dancing around the circle." They said, "But they would never set foot in their master's property." And of course, being the man who had not found my religion yet, it was uh, still slightly paranormally agnostic when it came to religious figures and religious iconography and, um, again, religious figures. They said, "But he didn't take you outside the circle." They said, "Woke up still in the circle." And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, you know, he must have he must have liked you being there because usually people wake up and he's moved you outside the circle because you're on his property. He doesn't want you on his property." And I said, "Are you fucking with me?" They said, "No, no, no." And they began to tell me stories about how the local kids from some of the local schools would go there and they'd wake up the next morning and there'd be three morning they would actually wake up outside of the circle or something sleeping and move them out of the circle. Um, and again, they would talk about when they were kids, they would get moved out of the circle. Now, these were generational stories. This has been happening in the circle um, for well over 100 years. The goings on at the circle have been going on for well over 100 years. And they looked at me and said, well, are you going to go back tonight? I said, yes, I will go back tonight. I said, well, see if he wants you to stay there tonight. They're talking about the devil. So I went back to the circle, and same experience, went back up there for the second night, staying there. Went to sleep a lot quicker this time, for whatever reason. I went to sleep a lot quicker in the circle this time than I had the night before. And I woke up, it was probably around 3 o'clock in the morning, if I remember correctly. Because I felt somebody breathing in my face, like somebody had their head over top of my face, their face over top of my face, breathing in my face. And it smelled like a mixture of cedar and swamp water. I know it's a hell of a image, isn't it? Breathing in, and it was hard breath, breathing hard into my face, and it snapped me awake. And I looked around, of course, had my flashlight out, and I realized I'd gone from the center. I had something I had not remembered moving myself, but I'd gone from the center of the circle to about 4 feet from the edge of the circle. During the time from when I went to sleep to the time that the breath, somebody breathed, something breathing in my face moved me closer to the edge of the circle. And I believe if I had not woken up when I did wake up, that I probably would have been outside the circle when the sun had come up. Well, that scared the shit out of me. Again, it chilled me to my bones because I could not get that smell out of my face and out of my nose. So I took and I was still in my sleeping bag too, mind you. And I woke up. I dragged myself back over to around the center of the circle with my sleeping bag trailing behind me, and I got back in it. And I have to say that it wasn't long before the sun came back up, and I was determined to at least get a couple more hours of sleep in. So I did. Went to sleep, sun came up, it woke me back up, and I went back to town. And again, saw a lot of the old farts there in town again. Think of a musty cedar chest. You probably don't have a lot of experience with swamps like I do. Think of, you know that smell that they put, that odor they put in propane so you can smell propane to know that it's leaking around you? Think of that smell being concentrated and had cedar on top of that, and that's what it smelled like. It smelled like a cedar tree farted, ate a skunk and farted it back out. That's what it smelled like. Gotta love my country comparisons, I know. And so I told them my story, and they said, well, he was taking you out of the circle. He was dragging you feet first out of the circle. You might not want to go back up there. And I said, well, I told him he gave me permission to stay there 3 nights. And I'm going to go back up there for the 3rd night. So I went back up there. They told me not to go. The locals told me not to go. But I was determined to go. So I went back up there because I was going to get my $50 worth. I paid that asshole to stay there. So I went back up there. Again, fell asleep fairly quickly. Made sure that I had wound my grandfather's pocket watch. For those who don't know any better, the young people out there, used to be a time where you had to wind your watches. And my grandpa had a pocket watch that he would wind. He loved that watch. And before he passed, he handed me that watch and had me keep it. Love that watch. You can still see to this day where he would rub that watch, and he wore his thumb's imprint on that watch's face. That's a really beautiful piece of timekeeping. That means a lot to me. But I made a conscious effort to Hey, heavy metal, you're not late, dude. Welcome to the story. We're on third night, by the way, heavy metal. And well, the watch, and this is going to be important because if those who do not know, um, the old watches that you would have to wind, you could literally hear them ticking when you wound them up. You could hear them ticking off time when you wound them up. And I had this watch against my heart, in my pocket of my t-shirt. Uh, and it always brought me comfort when I slept at night, especially when I was in weird and dangerous places. And I think that's probably what helps me sleep is the sound of that watch ticking away in my breast pocket. So fell asleep with that sound, and this is the reason why I told you this is about to become very important. Um, the it was around midnight. It wasn't 12:30 yet. It was still around midnight, a little bit after. I just popped awake, absolutely popped awake. And the first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes, started looking back and forth around me, I realized that my grandpa's pocket watch had stopped ticking. Um, and then the wind was blowing around me. And when I say around me, um, it was like standing in the middle of a dust devil. So I turned on my flashlight because I was feeling bits of detritus hit me in the face, you know, when I stood, leaned up out of my sleeping bag. I felt bits and pieces of leaves, twigs hitting my face, and I realized that the wind was blowing literally, quite literally, around the circumference of that circle that I was in the middle of. And I turned my flashlight on again. And as soon as I turned it on directly in front of me, right when I turned it on, that little circle of light that appeared at the edge of that circle, I saw a leg, a hand, part of an arm, and part of a head right at the corner of that circle of light that was being made by my flashlight. I can only describe it as darkness within darkness. Um, it was as if darkness could cast its own shadow. This would be that shadow taken form. And the fingers were incredibly long on that hand, and they were clenching like that when they were looking at me. And the foot had no shoes on it. Again, it was dark upon dark, but you could see the toes clenching in the soil in time with the hand, as if it was wanting to reach out and grab me. So I turned the flashlight over really fast to see if I could see the image of the entire being. And for the briefest second, I saw this pair of red eyes. Slanted red eyes, I have to say, that flashed brightly, and then there was nothing there. No body, no shadow, nothing was there whatsoever. And I swear, and the wind was blowing the entire time around the circumference of this circle. And it was as if the wind was laughing at me, as if the wind had heard or seen the funniest thing in the world, and it felt the need to laugh at me. Well, that scared the fuck out of me again. This time I did not go to sleep, and I stood up the entire night. The wind finally died down a few hours later. Did not see the shadow anymore around me whatsoever. Nothing came and moved me. When the sun came up, I took out my grandpa's pocket watch and looked at it. And it had stopped working. My grandpa's pocket watch did. The thing just stopped. completely working. Um, it was still wound well. It should have still been ticking away. The funny thing that I noticed about it was around the stem of it, when I pulled it out of my pocket, around the stem there was something that looked like black ash. Like somebody had taken their fingers. If you ever handle charcoal when you're doing your grill and you touch it, you get that little bit of charcoal on your fingers. And if you touch something, you leave a little charcoal fingerprint. Well, these were little charcoal prints that looked like fingerprints that were around the stem and around the edges of my grandpa's watch. And it had never left my pocket the entire night that I was there. I believe something reached in there and touched that watch. Remember, I kept that watch over my heart. Personally, I believed it. That is my belief. I believe that something was reaching out to touch me, and my grandpa's pocket watch kept them from doing that. And they pulled back away from me that night. I think it meant to do me harm that night. I went back down the mountain. I went back out of the woods. Of course, I stopped by the farmer's house and I thanked him for his time. It's what you do if you ever want to come back to a place. You got to go and thank them for letting you be there on their property, whether you had a positive experience or not. And I went back and down into Bear Creek. Saw the crazy old people at the diner again. Told them, my final story. And they told me that they agreed with me. Except for they said that it was the devil reaching to take my heart out. He had had enough of my trespassing, and he was looking to do me ill this time around. And it was probably the love and grace of my grandfather that kept him from reaching down and doing me harm. So I took their word for what they said, and I left. I never went back there at all. Ever went back there. Now, I did collect a little bag of soil from there that I had since once my religion when my religion found me and I discovered my religion and became a Hungan, a voodoo priest. I used that soil and something called crossing powder. It has to be one of the ingredients in crossing powder is to use the soil that has been touched by something not of this world is the best thing that you can use, especially soil that's been walked on by the dead and that's been tread upon by the dead. But when you use crossing powder at a threshold that somebody steps across, like at a doorway or a window, anything that crosses it, whether it be a living human being, a spirit, or a supernatural critter, yeah, I don't want Captain Schlocky to be touched by the devil. Yeah, I said Captain Schlocky. I got many names for my dingus. Captain Schlocky is one of them. But that's a story for another day. That powder is used to anybody who crosses it, whether they're a living human being or a living creature or something from the realm of the supernatural, paranormal, or preternatural. If they cross it, they cannot do you any harm, spiritually or physically, when they cross it. It's something that practitioners of the faith are well known for making, both for themselves, for their friends, and for other people that they feel need it. Well, I could have called him Admiral Schlocky. But let me spend a few minutes just telling you what I believe it was, because those who know me know that I place no belief in the devil, so to speak, or angels, or any the trappings that go along with them. For those who know me, already know this. So what I believe I experienced at the time, I believe that this was a portal of sorts. This is a place or things, and I'm not going to say things of the world of the dead. I think this is a place where non-human and unhuman spirits would come and go into our world and interact, to leave and go and interact with our world. Um, Specifically, I believe this is a magic space. That the things from, a world next to ours, a spiritual world next to ours, this is a space they've claimed that they've been able to pass through, whether it be a natural occurrence or something. Somebody has gone out there and created it or consecrated this ground to allow them to pass in and out of our world through it. And anybody who goes there, in my belief, you've heard me talk about everybody has their own resonance. Everybody has their own vibrational resonance, their own energy about them. And that this energy interferes and this resonance interferes with the workings of this portal. And the things that are using this portal to travel in and out of our world with and interact with our world through, they make sure that they get you out of it. They want you out of it. This is their property. And them moving you out of the circle, them trying to cause you harm, them trying to frighten you, is their way of saying no trespassing. I truly, truly believe that. Now, the crossing powders I said that I made from the soil that I did there, and I have since used that crossing powder up, I was told was some of the strongest and most charged powder that they had ever seen or ever been used by those who used the powder and witnessed the powder. They said it was the strongest they had ever seen. And I told them the ingredients, and they said, well, there's something about that land that is charged spiritually, incredibly. It's like, spiritually speaking, it was like spiritual uranium, fresh uranium out of the ground, in a spiritual sense, that it's seriously charged up, the crossing powder mixture when I made it. So, this word of warning. If you happen to go to Bear Creek, North Carolina, if you happen to stay at the Devil's Tramping Ground, be careful. It's beautiful there, but it's also frightening. And in my case, it was extremely dangerous. I want everybody to experience the wonders that I have experienced, but I don't want anybody to experience the danger that I have experienced. But I challenge you to go and have your own experiences, but do so safely and do so knowing your limits, the limits that you place upon putting your spirit and your physical body in danger, and to take care of yourself when you go to places like this. Alrighty, guys. That's it for tonight's What the Fuck Paranormal Chat with the Naked Bigfoot. I want to thank everybody who stuck with me tonight. I really enjoyed it. Have a fantastic evening or fantastic day whenever you view this. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe this video and subscribe to this video. You can find me on Twitter at VoodooMan3. I do follow back. I give information and tell people about upcoming videos that we're having. There's a lot more I have planned for What the Fuck Paranormal Chat. I know not all my topics are for everybody, but hopefully there's a little something. I cover at least one topic in my life that you'll find interesting enough to hang on. Encourage everybody to go out and safely explore this wild and wonderful magical world that we live in. And again, I'll emphasize, do it safely. If you play the drinking game tonight, do not drink and drive. Sleep it off. And until I see all of you again, have a wonderful evening. Love you all. Love everybody who's on tonight. Love everybody who'll watch it later. Have a fantastic evening.